Sure.
Thank you. All right, I think we can start if that's fine for all of you, and hopefully more people will be joining as we go on. So welcome everyone to our Fostering University Enterprise, a UK Africa knowledge exchange on incubation and innovation. So this is our third session this week. Some of you may have been with us yesterday and the day before for the first two sessions. For those of you who have not, welcome. We hope that you will enjoy today's session. My name is Christina Dax. I'm the project manager of BIC Africa, and I'm here today with my colleagues Robert Sanders, David Dagno, and Ahmed El Gatfa, who will be supporting throughout the session. And I'm happy to introduce today's agenda. So we have Coventry University with us, who will be the main presenter today. So thanks a lot to our speakers for being here today and accepting this invitation. So we will have Paul Fairburn, who's director at Enterprise and Innovation at Coventry University. And again, thanks a lot, Paul, for accepting this invitation and being here with us. And we will also have Paul's colleagues, Hussein Ismail, who's a business startup manager at Coventry University, and Albi Lamage, associate director at intellectual property commercialization at Coventry University. So today we'll start with a short introduction of BIC Africa for those of you who don't know yet the project and are here for the first time this week. Then we will go on to introductions and Coventry University overview, which will be delivered by Paul. After that, we will look more into detail about the student enterprise and entrepreneurship, specifically nurturing, mentoring, and supporting student enterprise. We will have a short break of about 5-10 minutes. Then we will zoom in on DigiSpin West Midlands pilot project, a regional spin-out support program. And finally, we will have about 20 minutes for group discussion and Q&A. So just to let you know, if you have any questions on the sessions, then please type them into the chat and we will do our best to answer them at the end of each session. Throughout the presentations, you will be muted. However, at the end of today's session, during the group discussion, we will unmute you and you will be welcome to ask any question, to unmute yourselves because we would like to have a group discussion at that point. Thanks a lot. Right, so just to shortly introduce BIC Africa for those of you who have not been here in the last 2 days. So it is actually part of a bigger EU program called Support to Entrepreneurship and MSME Creation. It consists of 5 country projects, each of which is aiming to establish and consolidate business incubators in their respective countries with the aim to foster decent job creation and sustainable livelihoods. So actually, these 5 projects are all implemented by different partners. So as you can see, 3 of them are led by UNIDO in Comoros, Madagascar, and Somalia. The Angola project is led by IFC, and the Ethiopia project by a consultancy company, Sequa. And in addition to these 5 projects, BIC Africa is a 6th one that really aims to create a regional network to interconnect these 5 projects and create synergies between them, and also to provide additional complementary support services. So this is really a little bit the vision and mission of BIC Africa. It's to support business incubation, build innovation bridges, and foster inclusive, decent job creation via creating partnership between the African and the European continent. Who are our beneficiaries? We work directly with business incubators most of the time, so primarily those that are involved in the 5 projects. But the work is, of course, for the benefit of the entrepreneurs, SMEs, and startups who will be, as such, benefiting from the support services that the incubators, the reinforced incubators, provide. We also work with a number of other stakeholders through the project. So, for instance, with the EU delegations in each of these countries, with policymakers, universities, business angels, and so on. And just to give you a couple of examples of the service offer that we have for the business incubator managers and staff in these 5 countries and beyond. So we do capacity building and skill development programs, sharing best practices in the field of incubation. So we host virtual trainings and also national and African boot camps. So today's session can be considered as part of this virtual training that we have. We have also services specifically targeted at creating better connection between European and African innovation hubs and also inter-African collaboration. So we've actually had a specific soft landing program and a staff exchange program whereby, for instance, African incubators came to Europe and were hosted by European incubators to enable them really to share best practices, learn from each other, better understand how a similar organization works in Europe. And also the principle of staff exchange was the same, but on an African level. So for instance, we had an exchange between incubators in Comoros and Madagascar. We also do quality assessment services for the incubators that are involved in the projects. And finally, we have other services such as diaspora, connecting African entrepreneurs to successful entrepreneurs from the diaspora, from their countries, which could be in the US, in Europe, or anywhere else in the world. So that is it in a nutshell. Of course, we have also other programs and other services, but this is just a short introduction on the core. Right, and just to give you a short overview again on this specific program, the UK Africa Knowledge Exchange on Incubation and Innovation. So, what are the objectives and who did we target it at? So it's open again at business incubator managers from the 5 countries, but we also wanted to have it open and accessible to incubators also from other sub-Saharan African countries so that most people could really learn and benefit from this program. So I know some of you have registered from the countries beyond those core 5. The idea is to facilitate peer learning and exchange to reinforce connections between African and European incubators. So yeah, really the idea is that through this series of interactive sessions, participants will be to explore different models, tools of incubation. The sessions feature a combination of really best practices, case studies, as well as open discussions and Q&A. And the themes are majorly, well, firstly, how can universities really position themselves as ecosystem leaders, as leaders of innovation? Secondly, how can university incubators really effectively support and nurture student enterprises and spin-outs? Thirdly, how can they help attract investment for the startups and help the startups and scale-ups effectively grow and attract finances? And finally, the aim is also to share about different incubation and acceleration models and to understand, in this case in the UK, how university incubators generate revenue, how are they sustainable, and how these models can also be perhaps applicable to the African context, which is of course very different, but we believe there are a lot of lessons that can be replicated and learned. Right. So we have a total of 4 sessions. We've already had the first two with University of East London, University of Cambridge. Today we have the third one with Coventry. And tomorrow we have a fourth and final session with University of Warwick at the same time. So if you'd like to attend, it's not too late. Please register, and it starts at the same time tomorrow. So that's it for the overview. And just before we dive in and before I hand over to Paul, we'd like to ask you just to get, again, an overall idea of who's in the room with us today. Could you please type into the chat where you're joining from and also your role and the organization that you are representing? Thanks a lot. Okay, great. We have Nenana from Madagascar, welcome. Matthew from Kenya, Daniel from Ethiopia Chamber of Commerce, some familiar faces. Hi, Daniel. Great. We also have Ahmed from Ethiopia, Jimma University, Abdi Fatah from Somalia. Okay, great to know that we have some familiar faces with us. Igor from Benin. Hi, Igor. Jean-Joël from La Rochelle, welcome. Vincent from Ghana, Hapa Space Innovation Hub, welcome. Okay, so it seems like similar to the past days, we have a bit of a mix between incubators from the country project as well as some from other countries beyond. Great. So, Paul, I'm happy to hand over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Christina, and good afternoon to all of our BIC Africa colleagues. It's a pleasure to be talking to you today, and a warm welcome to the session. So my name is Paul Fairburn. As Christina said, I'm Director of Innovation here at Coventry University Group. I'm just going to share a few slides with you, just to give you a little bit of background and context first. So our relationship as Coventry, as an organisation linked to EBN, goes back a long way. So I think we've been members of EBN for over 25 years. I'm also currently Vice President of EBN, so active on the board, and we're one of 7 UK EBN members, a really active part of the organisation. And for us, it's a really important connection because it allows us to benchmark our activities against the best in Europe in terms of incubation and acceleration services. So for me, today, as Christina's already laid out, I just wanted to give you an overview of how we work with industry, how we establish our own innovation ecosystem. We work with industry, our communities and government to deliver change and economic growth. And then you've got the best bits to follow, which is Hussein and Albi. So Hussein's going to be talking about the student enterprise agenda, and Albi more on the academic startup agenda side of things. But we all get involved in incubation acceleration activities across the board. I also wanted to start with a question for you, actually. So because we want this to be as interactive as possible, could you just let us know in the chat how many years your incubator accelerator has been operational? And just a quick sense, maybe one or two words as to where the focus is of your incubator, what sectors, what technologies, what markets, just to give us a sense as to where you're coming from. So if you could start to post that in the chat. Um, I'll then start to roll through my slides. But if you've got any questions, as Christina said, just post them and we'll pick them up at the end. So I can't actually see what's coming through, Christina, but hopefully there'll be a few
Yes,
responses.
yes, I can read out them when we have some of them.
Perfect. Give people a little bit of time to think. But yeah, how many years has your incubator been running, and what's your main area of interest from a market or a sector perspective? So we can come back to that at the end. I'll just give you a quick introduction as to who we are. So effectively, we are a global education group, and we're there to support our students. Of course, we're an education facility, but also we work very closely with business and communities. And the idea is that we deliver economic impact through the work that we do, our teaching, our research, and our enterprise. And if you look at the group itself, this is how we are structured as an organization. So we're obviously based in the UK. We have campus operations in Coventry, which is right at the heart of the country. So you can see top left. But we also have campus operations in London and in Scarborough in the north. And we have a new European or newish European campus in Wrocław in Poland, but we are an international group. So we have hub operations in Brussels, in Belgium, in India, China, Singapore, and also in Rwanda. And they effectively serve as our outreach facilities for all those major countries and continents, allowing us to build connections with recruiters, but also, most importantly, with local business organizations, with other universities to kind of build our network and collaborate across multiple markets. We're a large UK university, turnover just under 400 million, around 40,000 students a year, and investment in our research and knowledge exchange or enterprise activities around 60 million a year. And if I then focus in a little bit more on who we are as an organization, so we are effectively part of the Enterprise Innovation Organization. So that's split into three different operations: innovation ecosystem, product and business development, and commercial and operations. So you've got about 80 staff who are connecting our intellectual assets, our academic assets of Coventry University with businesses, other external organizations, and we support innovation. So very similar, I'm sure, to your own organizations that are connected to universities. We support commercialization, we provide skills solutions, we deliver collaborative R&D programs. We have a very strong focus on small business activity and SMEs, startups, spin outs, scale ups, and we look at creating new ventures and new businesses as well. And some of that will become clear through my short pitch. And effectively, we do that through a number of enterprise products that we use. And these will all be very familiar to you, I am sure. But these are the main things that we get involved in when we're delivering support services to businesses. So this forms an important part of our innovation ecosystem. So we provide SME support programs. We do a lot of consultancy, direct B2B consultancy work and contract research. A significant component of our delivery activity is providing skills solutions to the workforce, and that's typically non-accredited training, but it also can be accredited as well. But it's about enabling existing employers and employees to upskill their workforce to kind of ride with the economic changes, deliver new technologies within the organization, allow people to progress. And that's all supported through those programs. We do apprenticeships. We do a lot of industry collaborative projects. And of course, Albie will talk to you towards the end of the session about how we manage our own intellectual property assets and develop that into a commercial return. So just a very quick snapshot. These are the kind of areas of strength for us as an organization. So it's quite a complex slide, but what we've tried to do is capture what our key strengths are in teaching, in research, and in enterprise, and articulate or share those in terms of what those kind of key markets are. And this is all aligned with our UK modern industrial strategy. So this is where the UK government are saying this is where the most opportunities are from a market perspective, from a sector perspective. And we have capability and expertise in each of these areas. And those academic staff, those researchers, those teachers all make a contribution in these sectors to the development of students, local employers, companies, businesses, research organizations. So you can see, I guess there's nothing really surprising here. It will be very similar to your own markets, but this is where the concentration of activity is. Everything from manufacturing to culture and creative industries, life sciences, business services, defense, and of course, AI and digital technologies features very heavily as well. So this is how we kind of talk about our capability within the organization when we are pitching for new business opportunities. And what I wanted to do was just to very quickly show you how that kind of translates into what we actually do as an organization. What does that look like when we're actually delivering activity and support to companies? So going back to what Christina was saying about the purpose of the program, what we wanted to show you is how we demonstrate innovation ecosystem leadership. What do we do to give support to those companies that we work with to enable them to grow? And I think it's probably fair to say that at Coventry, we we have a set of products that we draw upon, but actually what we do is very client driven. So it's demand led. So we tend to operate much more on a consultancy basis where we are listening to the businesses that we are working with, determining, what their clear requirements are, what their challenges are, what their barriers are, where they want to invest, where they want to grow. And we look for the expertise within the organization and amongst other partners. And actually, that's where the EBN network, as an example, comes into play. Because if we don't have that capability within our own organization, we have a ready-made network to connect into that can maybe fill some of those gaps. So if there's a particular technology area or area of expertise that we don't have, we'll definitely work with other partners to provide solutions. And more often than not, if we are delivering something overseas in an international context, we will be working directly with those local networks and infrastructure partners, on site in country, because that's a much more effective way of delivering ecosystem or innovation support within that country. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of how we work directly with business. So the first example, this is a program called Innovate UK Business Growth. And it's a national program, but we are a delivery partner on this program. And effectively, this is allowing us to provide direct support to companies who are looking to scale and grow. So less focus on the startup side of things. This is more on the scale up side. What there's a recognition within the UK that businesses that were being successful in securing innovation funding at an early stage would reach a point in their development and would find it very difficult to make that leap to scale and grow the business beyond that point. So the way this program works is that the delivery teams or delivery partners, and interestingly, those of you that were on the St. John's session yesterday, Richard and his team there, they are also part of the same program. So I'm sure he would have talked to you a little bit about this. We're also a delivery partner, but effectively it's a team of advisors. So those advisors spend a significant amount of time working in the business. So I never see them. They're always out and about, but they will be talking to those companies, addressing some of their key issues or challenges around innovation support, finding funding, finance. It's always about the money. How do they break into new markets? How do they effectively grow in terms of trade and export? And these advisors are either ex-business founders or they've had years of experience working in the private sector in similar roles. So they have an inherent understanding of what needs to happen within those businesses to enable them to grow. So it's quite interesting because it's different or separate to the more academic engagement that we perhaps have where a company is looking for some specialist knowledge. This is much more about providing support to companies with specific business requirements or commercial requirements. So we need to be providing people who have that experience to help them scale and grow. And for those of you that are involved in accelerator programs, this is a good example of one that we are currently running with partners. It's a regional program. So we have a relationship with our West Midlands Combined Authority, who are our local government, and they have a big play on driving innovation and economic growth within the region. And what they decided to do was invest in a number of accelerator programs, which are focusing on supporting businesses to exploit technologies in new and emerging sectors. So, as an example, Clean Futures is one of 5 projects running within the region. It's around a £10 million program, and we've provided support to around 50 clean technology businesses or SMEs over the last 3 years. So the idea is that you have companies that have technologies that are applicable in automotive, in rail, and then industrial decarbonisation, so sustainable manufacturing. And we provide technical support for those businesses to develop their products, to win new investment, win new business contracts. And it's been hugely successful over the last 3 years because it's about putting the right people. So we have a group of very talented, experienced manufacturing engineers who've been working with these companies to help them develop that technology to allow them to capture more market share and grow as a business. So that's been a really successful and a great example of where accelerators can have a real impact on the regional economy. And it's just an interesting program because our government have recognised the importance of devolution. So actually devolving control and funding and investment to a region to have much bigger impact because the regions have a better understanding of where the priorities lie and where the investment needs to go. And then very similarly, we have another program which is currently running, which is called the Supply Chain Transition Program. So our, again, local authority, combined authority, have identified emerging markets or sectors where we think there is, real future potential for economic growth. And this program is designed again to help small businesses who are perhaps working in sunset industries that are in decline and allow them to pivot and deliver new solutions, new products, new services, which address the challenges in these priority areas. So you've got electric vehicles, battery manufacturing, health technologies, smart energy systems, future housing, and aerospace. So they're all areas of growth. And we're working together with other consortium partners. So it's not just the university on its own, but drawing on the individual strengths to deliver support into these companies that are looking to pivot into the new markets. And it's proving a really effective program. There's a business support element, there is an R&D component, and then there's also a training component around leadership in innovation. So we're right at the start of the supply chain transition program, but that's going to run for the next 5 years. And that's another important thing is if we can get to that point, long-standing programs supporting businesses in these emerging sectors, you have a lot more impact. Quite often it's problematic if you have short-term project windows to deliver. Companies don't have enough time to kind of respond and react and grow in that time. Having these longer term programs is really helpful in that respect. And then just finally on the regional programs, I wanted to just change tack. I'm very conscious it's quite technology focused and very heavily engineering focused because that's the nature of the West Midlands region where we focus our activity. But we have another program running which is completely different, but it's supporting the cultural and creative industries. And that's much more of a kind of standard support package that connects SMEs in our region, access to resources, events, and then providing direct support to creative businesses. So these are companies that are operational in AR, VR spheres, in gaming, heavily into digital marketing, film, performance, and TV. We have a real cluster of talented individuals and businesses in this space. And again, looking to grow that as a whole across the region. And that's how programs like this provide that support. So I've started very much on the kind of SME support side of things. I'll just pause there briefly if there's any questions that have come through so far.
So far, no, Paul. We have a
Okay,
few answers for your questions about,
I can see. Yes.
yeah.
So 3, 4 years, agri-tech, yeah, and edtech are interesting. Interesting, Charmaine. And again, agribusiness and tourism. Okay. I mean, these examples I'm giving are very engineering focused, but I think the basic principles are the same in terms of learning, best practice, what works in a particular area. Clearly, it has to be tailored to the individual businesses in those sectors, but I think the fundamentals are very similar. So just to give you an idea of the broader scope of activity that we get involved in, I've focused very much on the SME support side of things to start with. I just wanted to talk a little bit about our other products and how they work. We've been very successful in taking some of the expertise that sits within the university to provide good skills solutions to large organisations. So Jaguar Land Rover, well known globally. Um, they are based in our region, and obviously are making a significant shift from traditional internal combustion engine technologies through electrification to new electric vehicle technologies. And was recognized within the business is that they had to make a significant shift in the workforce to take advantage of the emerging EV market. And what we did, again, this is a good example of our partnership working, which I would absolutely encourage because we don't have all the solutions and all the capabilities within Coventry, much as I would like to, but we actually work really well with other training partners. So we worked with a further education college who provide skill solutions at an introductory level, and we come in at an intermediate level. And the whole point of this program was to train around 1,500 technicians and engineers around electric vehicle design and production. And this was well received and has been well received by JLR because it's very targeted, it's very bespoke to them as an organization. It focuses on high voltage systems, components, powertrain technologies, and it forms part of their future skills program. So one of a number of delivery partners helping JLR make that transition to EVs, and it's an ongoing challenge. And what's good from our perspective is that the content that we deliver is clearly going to be relevant to other OEMs, major automotive manufacturers looking to make this change. So we take the opportunity, although it's bespoke to JLR, there are underlying components that we can use in other conversations with our clients to deliver this same training. So this is a good example. I've got a couple of examples just to finish off with around physical, I'm trying to think of the best way of putting this. So, physical assets and infrastructure that we have within the university that we use to work with business. And within that, we are housing incubation and acceleration activities. So this is the Institute for Advanced Manufacturing and Engineering. It's called AME, or we call it AME. And it's a unique facility, and we call it the faculty on the factory floor. So it's established in recognition that graduates coming through universities weren't ready for industry. So the knowledge and experience that they were bringing meant that there was a gap between what the expectations of the businesses were in the manufacturing supply chain and what the students were actually coming out of the university with. So this is a partnership with an organization called Unipart, or Unipart Manufacturing Group, and we've established a physical facility at their manufacturing plant in Coventry, working together with their engineering teams to develop a completely new degree program, but also develop new research areas and also engage with their supply chain. And effectively, the students that are on this program, this manufacturing engineering program, go to Unipart, and they're working in a workplace environment. So it's a very different experience as a student because you're getting direct access to real working people, real working problems, and the actual facility itself is alongside the main production line at Unipart. So it's a really important relationship because it gives credibility to the students who are leaving that program, gives us access to the supply chain, Unipart supply chain, and effectively works to increase and improve the entire sector based around Unipart's activities. They effectively themselves started off manufacturing very traditional vehicle components like exhaust systems, fuel lines, fuel tanks. They're now themselves moving into EV technologies, and that's a result of the relationship. And then similarly, again, very automotive focused. I apologize because that's our kind of core area, but we work with a company called Hariba Myra, a Japanese owned business. The Japanese part of the business is very much into environmental monitoring technologies, but they acquired Myra, who are an automotive consultancy. They're based just north of where we are in the region. And this again is a really long-standing partnership. And there's a huge expanse of testing facilities, 100 kilometers of tracks, roads, and other surfaces for testing cars and other vehicles on. And we work very closely with them, particularly around connected and autonomous vehicle technology. So much more, not so much the vehicles themselves, but the actual technology that sits within the vehicle. And again, that's about bringing the best of our knowledge and expertise to support Myra and other partners to develop future transport technologies. And the whole purpose is this thing to drive towards safer, cleaner transport. And that relationship works really well. So you can see in the bottom left, that loop is a 2 kilometer test track, massive investment to give companies who are developing new vehicle technologies the opportunity to test it in a real world environment. And then top right is an autonomous vehicle parking facility. So it's again based on site, and companies have free access to come and use the facility, but working with us on research activities to support the development of those technologies. So then just to finish off with, because I wanted to allow a little bit of time for questions, just some more interesting examples, just to demonstrate we're not all about engineering. This is one of our PhD partnerships. So we're working with the Premier League. So those of you who love their football, this is a great opportunity to work with a prestigious organisation in the UK. And it was all focused around head injury assessment. So one of our exercise science academics has a real interest and a lot of expertise around neck strength. And he was investigating biomechanical forces around the neck, face, and trunk that result in changes in the brain. And how does that contribute? What do they need to do to reduce the incidence of head injury or the impact of head injury by improving neck strength and spinal strength? That's a project that's ongoing at the moment, but it's just a good way of kind of showing the kind of diversity of activity that we get involved in from an innovation ecosystem perspective. And then similarly, I wanted to include this as a kind of closing example because it's a good way of illustrating where universities and companies are given the opportunity to kind of secure grant funding to develop some really interesting and innovative solutions for existing problems. So the program is called Knowledge Transfer Partnerships, or KTPs. And effectively, the company dictate exactly what that project looks like. So what problem they're facing, what new product they're introducing. It has to be an innovative solution to a particular problem, but they can secure funding to actually drive that project forward. And what it pays for is a relationship between the company, the university, and a graduate. The graduate sits in the business, works on the particular project or the problem, is managed by the company but supervised by the university. So the university bring a particular piece of technical expertise. The graduate gets the opportunity to work with the business for a long period of time. So it's like a long-term interview, typically 2 to 3 years. And at the end of that process, if it's successful, which on 80–90% of occasions it is, the company have a new product or a new service, and the graduate then has the opportunity to secure longer term employment with that business. And I think it's still true that it's about 70% of KTP associates, as they called, or the graduates get the opportunity for permanent employment at the end of their project. And this example was a technique that we have established to remove precious metals from e-waste. So it's a huge industry now. But one of the key problems is scale. It's easy to kind of prove the technology within the lab. This program has actually allowed us to kind of work with a company to show that you can do it at an industrial scale. So that's a really great example of how we can work with businesses. And I thought that was a nice place to end, because it then just gives you the full spectrum of how we work with companies externally. So I am going to stop there, and I'm not going to talk about DigiSpin or Pace AI because I know that Albie will definitely be talking about that. So I will stop. So I think we're okay for time, Christina. I've got about 5 minutes for questions if people wanted to
Yes,
ask.
thank you so much. Thanks for the excellent presentation, Paul. Indeed, if you have any questions, just please type them in the chat so that Paul and team can answer them. Thank you.
I've stunned everybody into absolute silence, Christina.
Okay, no questions so far. All right, we have one question from Ahmed Mohammed, and it's how to collaborate with UIL.
Ahmed, do you mind coming on just expanding on that question and who UIL are? Ah, okay.
University industry linkage. Perhaps the question is how to create more linkages between university and industry. How can the two collaborate, if I understand it right? But Ahmed, feel free to elaborate on that.
If you can't come on, Ahmed, I'll try and answer the question. So if I'm assuming you're talking about it from a practical point of view, and I think so reflecting on how we work as an organization, we have a dedicated function that is there to kind of build links and relationships with industry that sits outside of the academic departments. So we as a team, we are centrally managed and run. And is effective. We have sales and business development people, we have innovation support people, project managers, IP specialists that cover the broad spectrum of work that we do. But there's an expectation that everybody has a responsibility to be out building links and connections with industry partners, because that's what leads to the growth in activity. So we effectively will spend time at networking events, at conferences. We will connect with, particularly from an international perspective, we'll connect with our own embassies overseas and other overseas organizations to build those networks and links. We talk to larger organizations to get integrated with their supply chains. So there's a whole range of different activities that we undertake, but I think it's having that dedicated staff base to be able to do that. Now I recognize that we're a large organization, so we do have a significant number of people who are active in that space. But if you're focused in particular areas or markets, like as I've seen, the agribusiness, the tourism, the edtech space, it's recruiting people as well that have experience in that sector and not necessarily from a higher education or an academic perspective. We tend to recruit people who have much more of a commercial background. And again, you'll hear that from Hassan and Albi, but it's true of all the teams that are involved in the enterprise and innovation space. They come with at least a knowledge of their markets and a network of existing connections that we can make use of. So I hope, Ahmed, sorry, I saw you came off mute briefly, but I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Paul. I think there are no more comments. Okay, we have another question from Daniel Abshir from Ethiopia. Nice to see you, Paul, and thank you for the presentation. What is the experience of Coventry University working with Business
Ah,
Innovation Center run by Chamber of Commerce towards promoting innovation? Yeah, Daniel represents the Addis Ababa Chamber of Commerce
okay.
incubator.
So So I don't think we have an experience of working with you guys in Ethiopia, but our it's interesting because our Chamber of Commerce are located on our technology park. So we have um, a number of other regional organisations that provide business support to companies in the local area. And the differential is that those organisations tend to support businesses on their kind of day-to-day operational issues. But we as a university will focus very much on the innovation and technology side of things. So we work very closely with our chamber. We have an organisation called the Growth Hub that provides similar services to businesses, particularly from an inward investment perspective. Um, so from a practical point of view, they're a really useful source of referrals. Going back to Ahmed's question, actually, the chamber and the growth hub in particular have those links and connections that we will make full use of because we can provide support to their businesses. So as an example, I'm giving a presentation this afternoon to a local network of businesses about the university services, and that's a referral that's come through from the chamber. Um, so it's extensive, it's long standing, because I think you can't just rely on your own networks. You have to work with those other organisations who have different connections and links. That's the important part for me.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for answering that question, Paul. And maybe if there are no other questions, maybe I just ask you to, could you maybe expand on your business model and maybe the different like sources of revenue that you have? Because that I think that's always of interest to the participants,
Okay.
unless you plan to do it later. Yeah.
No, I'm happy to do that. So it's a mix in all honesty, Christina. So traditionally, you would look to funding programs to support some of our early stage research and enterprise and collaborative activity. So we, we have a government that supports investment in innovation and research. So many of you may know, but we have an agent, the innovation agency in the UK is called Innovate UK, who I've mentioned a few times during my presentation because they are a key source of income for us, because they effectively are established to support academic and industry collaboration. And they're really pushing hard now on economic growth. I think it's recognizing that you can invest a lot in early stage startup businesses, but it can take a long time for them to have a significant impact on the economy, and they need support through the early stages of growth to get to a stable economic position. So that source of funding for us and our businesses is really important, but it's actively encouraged. Um, there are other national programs that support earlier stage research, which helps feed into this activity, but there are other parts of the university that will focus on that area. But so for us, it's very much about translational funding to fund those collaborations between industry and academia. We'll look further afield. So we definitely go for Horizon Europe and European funding. Again, there's a huge agenda around support for startups and scale ups and innovation within business. So we'll take advantage of that. But then equally, there are open tenders and contracts that we will go for in all countries, predominantly in the UK still, but there tend to be big training contracts that are tendered for that we will go for. And then there's direct business to business activity. So you've got companies who are paying directly for our services. So there's a real mix. And then Albie, again, I don't want to steal her thunder in particular, but we'll talk about investment. And that's the other source for us, particularly in our spin out activities.
Right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks for giving that explanation. Okay. Maybe if anyone has yet another question, please still type them in the chat as we're quite on time. And if not, then we will move forward, I believe, with Hussein's presentation.
Okay. I think there might be an opportunity later at the end just
for like Yeah, an we will open have an open discussion
Yeah.
session at the
Open
end, so we
conversation and
can
discussion.
understand
So,
that. Great.
um,
So the
okay.
floor
So
is yours. Thank you, Hussein.
thank you, Christina. I'm going to try and see if I can share my slides. Let me know whether they are visible.
Yes, but
Yeah.
we don't see them full screen yet. Yeah, perfect. Now it's perfect. Thanks a
Are
lot.
they full screen now?
Yes, yes, yes. Great.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Christina. And thank you, Paul, for getting us involved in this activity as well. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in Africa. And yeah, really, really pleasure for me to be part of this conversation with counterparts across Africa in incubation and enterprise. Africa is my home continent. I am from Somaliland myself. And it's really, really good to see a couple of colleagues joining from Somalia and Somaliland. I've been asked to come and share and show our approach to student enterprise and entrepreneurship in particular. And although my job title says business startup manager, um, and we will talk about student enterprise, my main motivation is not per se forcing startups, but it's a lot broader. So it's all about enabling students to explore their entrepreneurial potential, build up their confidence while they're at university, and then allowing them to develop their own entrepreneurial potential regardless of what pathway they choose. Paul's session was really, really technical. You would expect all of that array of development within a very developed and advanced economy. But I think it's really, really important to kind of try and, rather than it looking at copying a model or us promoting, the UK model, I think, it all depends on the context, right? So, student enterprise for us is very, very important because of the UK context. So, one Paul has shared, the model around enterprise and innovation, very, very advanced for an advanced economy that's incredibly developed. On the African continent, obviously, an emerging and a developing economy doesn't have, all of the institutions, that are all primed to support a growing economy. So I'm not, what I'll share is not about promoting a UK or even a Coventry model, but I think it's really important to try and, apply that in the context, in the environment and the locality that the audience is really much based at. So for the UK economy, because this shapes everything that we do, I wanted to share the UK economy at a glance. So the UK economy is predominantly dominated, by small and medium enterprises. So in total, there are over or close to 5.6 million businesses operating within the UK. And of those, only 0.1%, are actual large organizations and corporations with 250 or more employees. So as you can see from the figures, a very large proportion of our contacts in the UK are over 4 million businesses are self-employed practitioners, whether they be lawyers, doctors, electricians, plumbers, and so forth, trades individuals with zero employees, and these are really the engine of the UK economy. Those are then, growing and develop into micro businesses, 1 to 9 employee headcount. And then we've got some small businesses between 10 to 49 employees, over 200,000 small businesses. And then, the medium enterprises, again, are one of the fastest growing and driving engines of the UK economy. And this context is really important for us because, for my job role as a student enterprise business startup manager, the university has a big role to play as part of the UK context. And our duty, and hence why I said my role isn't necessarily about startup per se. We work
alongside these small organizations, as Paul has highlighted. And we realized that our graduates need to be prepared for the UK context, and because they will, no doubt work in or alongside these small organizations. Some will set up their own freelance entities as sole traders, practice their skill and what they've learned at university. Some will end up starting their own companies, but many will enter the world of work. And that's, what I see my role as being, preparing them to succeed in both life and work, because they will have to navigate the UK economic climate. So, this then kind of leads to what our purpose is. And our purpose is to prepare our students for the UK economic context by empowering them to believe in themselves. And, they need us to instill that confidence in them, to trust their own judgment, take ownership in, deciding on their next destination, whether it is the world of work or whether it is, as we would like to, allow them to pursue their entrepreneurial potential, starting up a company or pursuing a freelance career. And this is kind of the guiding principle that underpins everything that we do. So not every student will become an entrepreneur, but they will all someday need to think like one. And that's why I've said, student enterprise isn't or is as much about startups as it is about enabling students to realize their entrepreneurial potential. So when we decide, what the journey of a student would be through the student enterprise journey, we've kind of moved away from in thinking in terms of pipelines and funnels and, how can we achieve maximum startup numbers. And instead we've designed a journey that is in terms of graduate attributes and how can we prepare our students to succeed both in life as well as in work. And this is the 5-stage capability journey that kind of forms part of our student enterprise journey. It's important to say it's not a linear journey. They don't have to go stage by stage. They can go move back and forth, not just forward. And it's entirely based on, their engagement rather than them being selected to go into a particular support area. So this journey then begins with students being encouraged to come and to explore their curiosity around entrepreneurship. This is allowing them to open up their mindsets and allow them to see the range of support opportunities that are available. And then from there, we get them to develop skills through applied learning, through confidence development, and then giving them the opportunities to receive mentorship and apply their skills that they obtain from the activities that we do with them, to then make decisions around, whether post-graduation they would want to pursue, or even while they're at university, pursue an entrepreneurship pathway, or prepare them and make them stand out, ready for the workforce that the UK economy needs. So they're encouraged to launch and start businesses while they're at university, because, we realize that while they're at the university, we can help mitigate and support them with the risks, and also responsibilities are a lot fewer than later in life, as you can imagine. So what does this then mean in terms of what we offer? Probably something that you guys are very interested in. And like I've said, it's not, everything that we do fits into 5 simple building blocks. And these are definitely something that you guys are familiar with. They're not revolutionary in any way. And the intention is not for, for that to be replicated wherever. It all depends on the context. So what I'll do is I'll go through each area really quickly. And then I think the impact of what we do is probably a bit more interesting to reflect on and have a conversation on. So we can try and move over to that. So what do we do? We provide workshops, all of the standard enterprise and entrepreneurship support mechanisms that you guys are all familiar with. you probably offer them within your own environments, workshop, boot camps, mentoring, funding, and incubation. So I'll start with the workshops. So workshops are very much, the beginning point or the first place that students get involved in enterprise-related activities. And these are really just about, allowing students to develop themselves personally. So personal development orientated interactive workshops, and then, allowing them to have a glimpse into the world of entrepreneurship. So we explore topics like goal setting, ideation and hackathon activities, which you guys are probably all familiar with. And then, whether pitching ideas, whether that is for business and idea development, or whether it's related to helping them with academic projects. And then next, we've got boot camps. So this is really the area where they gain, entrepreneurship skills, and they're allowed to apply that in a learning environment. So boot camps is, where we go through the key components of startup development, and it all starts with, what is their purpose? Why do they want to pursue and a founder journey? So we'll go through, the entire setup of, how you would go about setting up a business, setting up an entity, all of the regular skills around branding, marketing, finances, registration, legalities, etc. And this is where we, get them to learn what it takes to actually develop a business and run a startup. And it's all practical-based learning with interactive activities. And we instill in them, the concept of idea validation. That every single student will come with some preconceived ideas and assumptions, and we're really focusing on learning by testing and learning by applying. So it's not necessarily about writing a business plan for ideas that haven't been validated. So it's all about, can you create a minimum viable product? Is the customer at the heart of everything that you're doing? How can you actually, try and test it, validate it, and then, share it with others, and grow, a startup from a bootstrap mentality, with a bootstrap mentality in mind. And then this is then followed with mentoring support. And our mentoring support is very light touch. So no doubt, whatever you operate an incubator or an accelerator, you will have an element of mentoring. Our mentoring is very light touch for a particular purpose, and it's also very time limited. So they get 4 hours over a 3-month period. And the approach is very much about, them being in charge of the process, and very much about helping them build their own decision-making skills and trusting their own judgment, understanding, how to make decisions based on trade-offs, exploring options. And the goal is, to help them learn to decide. We use a grow model. You're probably familiar with it. If not, you can Google it. It's a very useful model or a framework that we use, which is all about, do they know what they want to do? What is their goal? What is the reality that they face now in this moment of time? What are their options? And then lastly, what will and what actions will they take, and are they willing to take? They're in the driving seat, as we've said, and we don't want them to be reliant on a mentor. The mentor is there really to help them validate their strategies, their approaches, and to be used as a sounding board more than anything. And then we have funding, also something that no doubt is part of your repertoire. Funding, it's really, really important. But we're very clear that, it's not a silver bullet. And also, funding is very, very limited, even in, a very advanced and an enterprise economy like the UK. Funding is always very limited, depending on where you seek it, private grants, etc. But it's there, to support students who want to build, who have actually shown some commitment and, can demonstrate the capability. So it's merit-based funding rather than funding for funding's sake. And we use small amounts of funding, to try and help founders create MVPs, test their ideas, and, for those that are a bit more further developed, allowing them to start up and, scale their small operations. The smallest amounts that we tend to give out around £500 for proof of concept idea development, and probably the highest amount would be about £5,000 for a startup that's primed to launch and to succeed. And then lastly, as part of our 5 core support mechanisms, is incubation and community. So this is where we offer them the environment to be part of a community of founders, to be around peers with similar goals and motivations. And we believe that this community allows them to stay engaged. A lot of our students are international students, even UK students away from home. And this allows reduced isolation, shared cohort-based learning groups, celebrating with others of like-minded approach, and then also helping and supporting one another through shared experiences. And then our incubation space, that more or less just functions as a supportive space, that gives students a continuity, so they can run and set up the businesses while they're a student. There are very few that do that, but the vast majority, will try and set up an entity, a startup, upon graduation, because it's really, really demanding, the academic element for a student. So, giving them a supportive environment post-graduation allows, gives that sense of continuity, and students can, work on their startups, they can grow together, and then they'll be able to receive and have access to ongoing early stage venture development. And then this then all kind of brings us back to, why we think that our approach works for us in this moment in time, because it allows us to have the most maximum desired impact for the student, with the student in mind. So you guys are probably familiar with, the private incubator model, for a university. It's a funded element of the student experience, of the student offer. And, for us, and we're actually part of the careers and employability team. So that's the side of the professional services areas of the university that we sit in. The prime goal is really all about, how can we enhance the futures of the students and help them succeed in both life and in work. So it's all about graduate outcomes and building capabilities. So I think that's the kind of the biggest difference probably between a student enterprise at a university level and a startup or an accelerator or an incubator, that operates in a private model outside of a university ecosystem. If you have any questions, as Paul and Christina have mentioned, please add them in the chat. I'll then kind of just move on to, how we measure our impact. This is, as I've said, our main focus being on enhancing graduate outcomes. We focus and we use the theory of change. So how can we make sure that everything we do has actual learning and graduate outcomes attached to all of our activities? And then we use our primary tool, which is the Entrecom framework. If you guys are not familiar with that, it's a tool that's created by the European Commission to define and assess entrepreneurial skills. So this allows us to measure, or allows anyone to measure the distance traveled, once you go through a particular learning journey from when a student started or before a student started with us, till they've received all of the content, all of the learning, and then we do a measure on the back of that, and then you can see the distance traveled, the learning gained. So the three areas that the European Commission has identified is, how can we help the population, European zone being one of the largest economic areas. It's all about enterprise. It's all about startup, and as I said in the beginning, that context. Yeah, how can we grow a developing community? So the three core elements are entrepreneurial confidence, entrepreneurial abilities, and then teaching, how to act and take advantage of opportunities. So we set ourselves an ambitious target of 20% improvement in these core competencies. As an example, our latest cohort, we had 15% improvement in entrepreneurial confidence and abilities, and a 20% improvement in the capacity to act on opportunities and ideas. So it kind of shows, our students are learning, and we're preparing them for the world of work, because these entrepreneurial skill sets are very much sought after by employers, and universities work with employers, as Paul has highlighted, incredibly close. They want us to prepare the next generation for the workforce for maximum success, and we have something called graduate attributes, and it is instilling these graduate attributes, that sets students apart and readies them for the workforce. So the fact that all of our enterprise activities are aligned to enhancing positive graduate destination outcomes, we can actually prove that, because Coventry University has a very strong track record in graduate employability. 88% of graduates were in work or further study within 15 months of graduation. And if you strip away further study, 59% of students secured full-time employment. And that is, we say students who engage in enterprise activities, student enterprise and student entrepreneurship, develop a very competitive edge that sets them apart in the job market.
Hussein, sorry to interrupt you. So there have been a couple of comments and questions in the chat.
Brilliant.
Would you like to address them now, or should we?
I've got 2 more slides, and then because I'm not able to see the...
Yeah, I can read them out to you, or we can just do it at the end of your presentation, as you prefer.
I'll take them now. Go for it.
Okay. So we had a comment also just on the subject you were talking about from Jean-Joël, saying that in France we talk about entrepreneurial skills that indeed support the pool of skills that, well, people can use then later in jobs, internships, developing new product, service, and so on. Then we had a question from Evaldo, who's representing an incubator in Angola, on how do you graduate the student startup? So I believe the question is, when does a student startup considered to, let's say, be mature enough or at the right level to then graduate?
Okay, so I'll do the last question first, and then you can... I'm trying to see where in the chat the questions were. There's quite a lot of questions actually, which is good. So the last question, which was when do they leave the university ecosystem or the university phase of their journey?
Exactly. That was one. There are 2 questions. That was the first one. Yeah.
Okay. So very good question. I've got 2 case studies at the end, and probably kind of stealing the content from there, but yeah, we maintain very, very good relationships with all of the students that leave, but particularly those that end up setting up businesses. And the answer is we would like them never to leave in terms of collaboration and connection and contact, because these ultimately provide a lot of benefits for us. So in terms of the incubation, we say we offer them continuity and support because they're early stage ventures up to 12 months post graduation. So once they've graduated, they can use our incubation space for 12 months free of charge. Obviously, all depending on how successful the startup is running. But then after 12 months, it's all based on needs analysis. The vast majority will move on. And then, our priority is making sure that we continue supporting them. The support tends to finish 15 months past graduation. Those are kind of the service level agreements that the university has. So that was one question. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And we have another question from Nana on how long does it take from the exploration phase to the launch of a startup?
Good question. Yeah, very, very good question. Oh, that all depends, varies significantly from student to student. Actually, what I'll do is I'll go through the next slide. So this kind of gives let me get rid of this. This gives you kind of a typical, oops. Can you guys see still my slides?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Something popped up. Yeah, I thought it would be interesting to show the typical participant background, and then kind of will answer how long it typically takes, for a student to from idea development stage all the way to maybe launching a startup. It varies. We've got 33% of our students are from a mature background, meaning that either at a postgrad level or final year students. And so those that start, because obviously in the UK it's either a 3-year student degree or a 4-year if there's a gap year, and then the postgrad is only a 1-year period. So depending on whether a student joins in year 1 or at a later stages during their study, it kind of all depends on how much time the students dedicates to their idea, how they get on with actually developing and launching the business. You would say it's probably between 12 months to 2 years that the support from the starting point to the point where they're more or less self-sufficient. 12 months is really about hands-on, a lot of hands-on support, tailored support, and then from 12 months they're then kind of gaining that independence, so to speak. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so yeah, our students are very diverse, evenly split between genders. A lot of our students are from ethnic minority backgrounds, Black, Asian, minority ethnic, and we've got a really good completion rate from once a student starts with us till actually seeing through the content and the program. And a lot of our students, come through word of mouth, so recommendation either through the peers that have gone through a journey, or through academic and other professional service areas that would recommend once someone expresses an interest in entrepreneurship and in either working as a freelancer or wanting to run their own business. And this helps us because it demonstrates that the program is accessible to all, and it's also very diverse in terms of diversity. And then I wanted to show you just a small snapshot of the last 3 years cumulative overview of the impact of our startups. We've worked with 88 startups in the last 3 years. And as you can see, the sectors that they operate in, 25% in the kind of the tech, IT, computing, and online services areas, followed by arts, media, and cultures, and then third in health and well-being. And this is very much reflective of our university profile. So we've got a really good engineering and computing disciplines, a vibrant arts and media and creative cultures, and a very strong health and well-being base as well. We're most proud of the socio-economic impact in terms of jobs generated, the turnover within the local community economic areas, and the fact that some are scalable and are successful in seeking growth and external investment outside of the university, outside of grants, etc. But this is those 88 startups. The successes are very, very small, I have to say, as you can imagine. A lot of the startups that we've supported are in the nature of portfolio workers, as we'd like to call them, freelancers and sole traders, that are practicing their craft and working for themselves, in the disciplines that they studied while they were at university. And then others are, of a startup nature. And then just wanted to show you some of our activities in action, just so you can get to see some pictures. We always kind of piggy bank on large global activities around enterprise and entrepreneurship, and have flagship activities during the Global Entrepreneurship Week. We are very much champions of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs, and do hackathons and ideation sessions on those. We see these as big opportunities for students to ideate on, to try and solve the world's biggest challenges and biggest problems. They present the biggest opportunities, in our opinion. We try and do as accessible as possible activities, both in person as well as online, because of the range of our campuses and where they're located. And then this is kind of just a typical cohort size of our accelerated boot camp, some of our funding opportunities. And then I'll finish off with just 2 case studies really quickly. Elliot, that you can see here on the slide, when he came to us, he just had an idea that he wanted to do something with drones. And then having gone through the student enterprise journey, through a lot of hard work and several pivots, he now runs a very successful drone logistics startup, employing 6+ members of staff, turning over £300,000, and also scaling and raising external investment to grow the startup. And then this is Radman. He actually came to us, when he was actually running his little side hustle as a freelance photographer, a sole trader. And then, since joining the program, he managed to transition his sole trader into a proper media production company as a limited company. And, he hit £100,000 turnover within 2 years of launching, and is also, growing and scaling as he develops his startup. For us, what, the most proudest is the fact that both Elliot and Ratman give back a lot to the next generation of founders, whether that's mentoring, whether that's taking on interns and work experience of other students, and hiring graduates from Coventry University as part of their workforce. And then that's it. I'll stop here and happy to take any questions. I'll unshare my screen so I can have a look at the questions. But I think if we can have a conversation, that would help as well.
Thank you so much, Hussein. Indeed, feel free to type in any questions in the chat for Hussein.
I'll try and go through some of the questions.
Yeah, since the latest ones you answered, there were no more questions. Just a participant from Somaliland who asked for contact details, but I think I will share that at the end of the session.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think
share your LinkedIn profile or your email as you prefer. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a problem. Yeah, I think, this is really good, Christina. I think it's brilliant that we're having these conversations and you guys are putting up these opportunities to exchange knowledge, and very, very happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn and, continue the conversations on a one-to-one basis, and very happy to find opportunities to collaborate as well.
Yeah,
We've worked
great.
with universities in South Africa, Stellenbosch University, some universities in Senegal, only really through previous colleagues who had contacts and relationships with some of the universities that we've had some collaborations with. So hopefully there will be some discussions and collaborations on the back of this activity as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And indeed, that's the idea. I mean, with these sessions, our aim is also to promote this type of collaboration. So after the session, of course, feel free to reach out to Paul, Hussein, and the team. And hopefully there will be some fruitful exchanges and collaborations can be established. So indeed. All right, I think we could take a 10-minute break if there are no more questions, and then we could start back again at 10:40 UK time, 11:40 Central European time, and 1:40 p.m. East African time, so that we have some time to take a coffee and get a break. That's fine for you, Paul, Hussein?
Absolutely. Yeah.
10 minutes, yeah, no problem. Good.
10
Yeah.
minutes.
Sure.
And yeah, I'll just pop in the chat. So all of you, don't go away. Be here in 10 minutes and we will continue. Thanks a lot. Hello, Paul. Albi, are you back?
I'm always here, Christina. Is
Great.
Albie there? She's definitely around. I've been having a couple of offline conversations, so
Perfect.
what time is it now? Okay.
We can start in a bit.
Oh, I just got a message from Albie to say I don't have access to unmute or show video.
Yes, I just asked David to enable that because I believe
Ah,
she went out and got back into the room.
oh, okay.
So that should be sorted.
So sit tight, Albie. It should be sorted.
Oh, there you go. That work?
Oh, you're in.
Great.
Excellent.
Hi. All right, I'm going to try and share my screen. Just bear with me. Just one moment.
Great pitch, by the way, Hazen. Thank you.
It's good, thank you.
I was listening quietly in the background.
Were you there?
I
Brilliant.
was.
Very good.
Can we see that?
Yeah, I'll be visible.
Yeah. It looks like you've got subtitles running, but
There we go.
there we go.
For some reason, it's a Turkish. I don't know why. Don't ask. Don't ask. Just let me know when we're ready, Christina.
Yeah, I think we're good to go. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, okay. Morning, everyone. Thank you. Thanks to Paul and Hussein as well, who's just given a couple of really brilliant presentations, just sort of showing the entire innovation ecosystem. So Paul sort of given the big picture, and then Hussein sort of showing how we build founders and sort of early entrepreneurial talent. So my role sits almost at the next stage of that journey, when ideas and founders move from potential to pressure. So I'm Albi. I am the Associate Director at Coventry University, and I manage IP commercialization, spin-out activity, and tech transfer across the board. And today I'm going to share with you how we built a system called DigiSpin West Midlands, which is a system that was designed to turn innovation into companies that can stand up in the real world, and why this might be useful for, I suppose, for you all incubators working across sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. So before I talk about DigiSpin in practice, I think it's really important to explain why it exists. So DigiSpin West Midlands was created to address a problem that many universities, so I'll talk about the UK primarily, but I suspect it'll be a common challenge across the board. But yeah, it was created to address a problem that many universities face and incubators face sort of globally. We generate really strong ideas, but only a few of those become scalable and into investable companies. So in the UK, this challenge around these ideas being around, but not having a system that can support them get to market quick enough. This challenge was formally recognised in the independent review of university spin-out, which was done back in 2023. So it was a government-led initiative reviewing all UK universities and how we essentially do spin-outs, and then they developed a guide which was what best practice looks like, how we accelerate that support system. And sort of DigiSpin was was by Research England, a funded project to sort of address that. And so what that report showed is that essentially it highlighted issues like, slow company formation, inconsistent equity models, weak commercial support system for founders, and so on. So DigiSpin was developed, like I said, as a Research England funded pilot, so designed to essentially test almost like a different approach. So not treating spin-out as one-off success stories, which is typically the case, but almost building a shared, repeatable venture creation system across multiple universities. So DigiSpin brought together Coventry University. So I'm the principal investigator for DigiSpin. So we were leading from Coventry University in collaboration with Birmingham City University and the University of Wolverhampton, all geographically positioned very close, so all in the West Midlands. And we already are founding partners of West Midlands Combined University. So we had kind of almost like a pre-existing relationship anyway, which massively helped us come together to build this shared model. So we came together to build a collaborative model for turning innovation into to accelerating innovation into the market. So our core goal was very simple. So we wanted to move from almost like an ad hoc support system for spin-outs into a more structured system that produces sort of faster, fairer, and more commercially viable ventures. And like I said, we did that as a result of that independent review that was done in the UK, but it was a fantastic project, sustainable project actually, because we're now in the process of doing phase 2 of that. So what I'll share next is how the system worked and what incubators in, I suppose, different contexts might learn from it. Okay, so this slide almost I'll repeat myself a little bit from what I said earlier, but essentially what it captures is the core problem that DigiSpin was designed to address. So across universities, incubators, and many innovation ecosystems across the board, ideas are rarely the issue. So there's plenty of ideas. We have research, we have talent, we have creativity, and plenty of ambition. The real challenge is essentially what happens between the idea and the development of a real company. So there's often that missing middle, which is the gap between the concept and commercialization, and between sort of innovation and money and revenue, between founders and investors. So we sort of support in that missing middle with DigiSpin. And innovation rarely, fails because it lacks potential. It sort of fails because there is a systemic challenge. There's a lack of structure. There's a lack of ownership structure, a governance issue, and also very often there's a lack of a clear route to market. So, what happens once you get an idea and you do everything that you need to get to market is, it's a challenge because that route isn't always very clear to everybody. So DigiSpin was built specifically to close that gap and essentially help turn those ideas into companies through those repeatable, kind of more disciplined and commercially focused system. So what I wanted to sort of zoom in on here is where my team specifically sits within that ecosystem that we developed, both entirely within Coventry University, but also within the DigiSpin program that we developed. So our role and our mission is essentially to close that gap, bridge that hardest gap in innovation, which is the gap between those ideas and real companies, research revenue and potential and commercial reality. So we focus on 5 So we focus on generally anyway within our tech transfer office at Coventry University. In supporting our research, we focus on 5 core areas, and those principles were also carried forward within the DigiSpin program. So we build spin out from research. We protect and we commercialize intellectual property. We structure a fair and investable founder equity. So we have a capital table. So once a company's been set up, we make sure that's a fair to founders who are sort of leading those companies, but also fair and you know, we support investable founder equity essentially. So it's easy, and once that company gets into the market and gets in front of investors, that they don't get turned away because there's a really complicated capital table and equity table up front. We also prepare ventures to be credible to investors. So again, so standing the investor audits and investor due diligence and so on. So we make sure that the prep and the work that we do with founders up front is to stand that investor test, and then ultimately sort of supporting real market entry and scalable proposition. So in simple terms, I think where we sit is that at the point where innovation sort of stops being academic and starts being sort of a commercial you know, a company. So this is the sort of foundation of DigiSpin as well, which is what I'll sort of show you next, where we turned that role and those 5 core principles into a repeatable system level model for building sort of real companies. Okay, so DigiSpin is how we essentially operationalized that role at scale. So not a one-off project. We did it as in response to that independent review that was done in the UK. But actually, for us, you know, it's not just a one-off project. It's not a traditional incubator program. For us, it's a venture building system that works very well and that's designed to make spin-out creation more sort of repeatable, faster, fairer and more investable. So, you know, instead of treating those spin-outs as occasional sort of success stories, we design that structure behind it and that framework to consistently turn that innovation into real companies. So focus for us was very much on the execution. So for example, on the commercial validation. So we build a shared platform that we shared across the 3 universities, which was the platform to enable capturing of the ideas that were coming through that system. So this is a collaborative platform that helped us manage that innovation that was going through the sausage machine, as I like to call it. So and also, you know, our idea was to accelerate spin-out activity. So the innovations that we took forward in DigiSpin were innovations from across the 3 universities, and they were ideas from various stages of the technology readiness level, because we were just testing the pilot. But obviously, within phase 2, we're looking at a lot more structured incoming ideas, and we will be categorizing them into different sort of TRL levels. But we will build a very much a spin-out factory, if you like, and a commercialization engine, which essentially supports sort of driving value across the 3 universities and the 3 entities that were part of the pilot and the program. Okay, so this slide, like I said, we very much focus on the execution and sort of transforming those academic concepts and research into market-ready businesses with very clear commercial pathways. So we built a program over the 6-month period that we delivered the project, and this was kind of the journey essentially that they followed. So the key idea is that, you know, spin-outs, typically when we build the system originally, we very much focused on the fact that spin-out companies shouldn't just depend on luck, on timing, or individual champions. And I guess I can say that you know, in many universities we do have the similar researchers coming up regularly with ideas. So I guess what we wanted to avoid with DigiSpin is building a system that doesn't just depend on those factors, but it's structured and it's clear and it's disciplined, and it's a disciplined pipeline that sort of reduces the risk and supports kind of chances of success. So we started by started with opportunity discovery. So this was the beginning of the program, where we identified all the promising research from across the 3 universities, and those ideas were submitted into DigiSpin. Then moved into validation. So we utilized a number of experts across the board in 3 universities, to both internal and external, to be able to validate those ideas and look at that commercial potential and market feasibility. So we weren't just taking ideas for the sake of taking ideas forward, but we actually went through a scoring mechanism to validate those ideas properly. Typically, you move into a phase of proof of concept. So, a lot of the ideas that came through our program, some had developed proof of concept, some didn't. So we went through a model of sort of analysing those ideas and making sure that we picked up the sort of the technologies that had market feasibility and commercial opportunity for the market. So there's a little bit of support around kind of the proof of concept and guiding the other ideas through the right channels, how they can develop from very early stage into further on, to be able to get the support and to be able to be spun out later on. This section now, the business model element of DigiSpin, was the part that we spent quite a bit of time with the academics that went through the program and helped them define really clear value proposition and a revenue model that would stand the investor test. So we spent quite a bit of time sort of pitch development, business model development, revenue model, and really looking at their technology in depth to make sure that we were supporting the right ideas, we were supporting the right founders, we had the right teams, we had the right business model, and so on, before we sort of pushed them forward. But essentially, the next phase of the program was then to go to deliver those pitches and those business models to real investors, with a view to form a company and a clear sort of governance model. So we did a real pressure test of those technologies that came through the DigiSpin system. Okay, so what did that impact look like? So the original DigiSpin, which was finalized about 8 months ago. So the impact was 3 UK universities. We had 6 months and developed a program from scratch, a shared technology transfer model. And within that timeline, we supported 40 ideas, 11 of which of those teams that went through progressed to investor-ready pitches, which meant that they met the threshold for commercial credibility, market validation, scalability, and so on. And out of those 11, 2 of those ventures, which are actually Coventry University ventures, are now progressing towards spin-out company formation. So it's a real success for us to be able to deliver that through the DigiSpin program in that timeline, such a short timeline. So I think the most important point here is not just the numbers that we were delivering. I think it was the fact that we built this shows that we've built a repeatable system and a way to sort of move from innovation to investable ventures to real company creation within months, not years. So I'm not sure how many of you will have had this experience, but typically it's a minimum of 12 months for an idea to go through all the IP protection, commercialization plans, and so on. I mean, it depends on size of teams, of course, and depends on different university policies and processes. But on average, it's a minimum of 12 months for sure. So I think for us to be able to turn that around within 6 months was incredible. So very proud of our DigiSpin program. And I think for incubators and for universities, this sort of demonstrates what is possible when spin-out creation is treated as a structured pipeline rather than just a one-off success story, which is usually the case. Okay, so one of the biggest differences, I've put this slide here because I think one of the biggest differences in DigiSpin and in building that program is that we didn't avoid any difficult conversations. You know, we treated all of those difficult conversations as essential. And of course, we had many of those come through. We had founders that had different experiences from different universities. We had technologies which had been laying around for, you know, legacy IP that sat there for some time with no, you know, perhaps no real support, some of them. We had founders who were confused about the system, about what they could do. And I think being able to have those really, really difficult conversations really helped us shape DigiSpin in the right way. So the typical questions that we kept having sort of crop up were, you know, who owns the intellectual property? And that was genuinely, that was one of the biggest questions that came through, because when it comes to IP ownership, I think establishing those clear intellectual property rights is so essential to do really really early on in the process. But we were surprised to find that, well, in fact, we weren't surprised to find that many founders didn't realize that that was, you know, so critical to them sort of building their ventures. We also had things like, how should equity be split fairly between founders and institutions? And of course, you know, 3 different institutions with 3 different lots, 3 different policies, 3 different processes. You can kind of understand why they would be perhaps in some areas underperforming, and you know, so there was a real challenge. So we also had questions like, well, what happens if a founder leaves or underperforms? You know, when should a venture pivot? When should we decide to proceed? And so on and so forth. So I think many incubators focus very much on sort of encouragement, mentoring, and protecting sort of founder confidence, which is, you know, which is really key. But I think if we avoid these sort of hard decisions, which are some of the core bits around the IP, around the equity, around some of the really sort of harder things in that process, then we often create companies that feel supported but are not investable. So our approach has been very different here. We've very much prioritized honest feedback, you know, commercial discipline, evidence-based decisions, and so on, even when it was uncomfortable. So because in the real world, investors, customers, and markets will ask these questions anyway. So our job was to just make sure that those ventures are ready before they face that reality. So it's really, really powerful for us on that. I just wanted to pause on that to see if there was any question. I don't know, Christina, if you can see the screen.
But yes, for the moment,
there are no
questions.
It's a really important slide for us, because I think the core of, you know, some of the key principles of delivering really successful spin-outs was actually picking up on some of those core issues and handling some really difficult conversations to ensure the long-term success.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions on this specifically, don't hesitate to type them in the chat, so Albie can address them.
Okay, if not, I'll carry on. But
maybe in the open discussion,
yeah, that's fine.
We'll have later.
Okay, so what I'm going to share with you here is just a case study of a technology which went through the DigiSpin program, and essentially to show you how university research can become, or has become, a commercial asset into the market. So this technology is Pace AI. I know Paul mentioned the name earlier on, and I was very much hoping he wasn't going to go into detail, but he didn't. Yeah, Pace AI is one of our technologies that from Coventry University that sort of it stands for Pedestrian Accident Collision Evaluator. So it's an AI-powered tool which is designed to help the police and investigators and forensic teams to reconstruct pedestrian road traffic accidents. So essentially what it does, it estimates the vehicle speed, pedestrian movement, and impact timing, and different sort of scenarios in a collision. So it also addresses sort of speed of a vehicle in a hit and run, typically. So a very critical technology for the police. We've currently licensed that across Germany, and we are currently looking to spin out, and that's been one of the success stories of DigiSpin. So the original problem was that collision forensics is slow, it's expensive, and it's highly a manual task. So police have to do quite a lot of work in order to identify how fast a car was going, what direction of that pedestrian was heading. Were they running? Were they walking? Were they standstill? And essentially to find that information of how fast a car was going, especially in hit and runs, is very, very difficult, and it can take days, weeks to be able to do that. And they often invite lots of experts. Sometimes CCTV cameras don't work, so it can be quite a complex process, and it delays investigations and legal decisions. So our solution here with this technology was supporting this technology was essentially to turn that academic research that has been, this has been researched for years by one of our academics, and turn that into a practical decision support tool that speeds up those investigations, that reduces forensic costs, but most importantly, it provides justice quite often for people that can't get that otherwise, because evidence is almost inexistent. So I think the key point here is that this didn't stop at research, but it could have quite easily been that. So we structured the intellectual property, we validated the demand from real end users. So we did quite a lot of work with Germany, with the UK police, with police globally, and we built a commercial licensing model and deployed that system into sort of a real police setting, which is a major success story. And today, Pace AI is being used to sort of support those faster investigations. It's being validated across the board. So what we'll have is more sort of consistent forensic analysis and more improved decisions. So this is exactly how DigiSpin was designed to enable, is taking those interventions beyond the academic setting, beyond the academic value, and then turn them into sort of real adoption commercial propositions with real public impact. Okay. I think one of the most important lessons we've learned through this program was that that investors don't fund ideas. Well, sometimes they do, but they don't. Generally speaking, they don't fund just ideas. They want structured businesses. They fund structured businesses. So a spin-out becomes investable when it moves beyond passion and potential, and there's a lot of that. And when it demonstrates a real commercial credibility. And in our experience, there's a few kind of fundamentals that consistently matter. First, I think having a real customer problem, always starting with that. So something that people are genuinely willing to pay for. And second is having defensible intellectual property or competitive advantage. So I think that's important, because what you want to do is make sure the value is locked in and can be protected. Third, I think a third key thing is to have a credible founding team with skills to sort of execute, not just invent. And again, a lot of academics are very strong in that area of developing, coming up with new ideas, but often not in sort of inventing, but often not comfortable in moving into the world of commercial and being able to execute. So I think having that really credible founding team is key. I think fourth, it's really important to have a clear and realistic revenue model, because what we sort of talked through DigiSpin is that we want to show how money will actually be made. Yes, you have got a really good idea. Yes, there's potentially a market or customer, and you've got a good team and good IP, but how will you make money from that idea? So, we worked with the teams to very much focus on that specific question and really challenge and pressure test them around those points. And then fifth, I think it's really key to have some really strong governance, as you may know, and also very, very clear ownership structures that investors can trust. And very often we deal on a day-to-day basis, me specifically in my role, but also through the program, through DigiSpin, is that quite a lot of founders are not clear on who owns the IP fully, and there's lots of complications. So in our day-to-day sort of supporting our research and academics, we very much focus on ensuring that they are very clear on the ownership of the IP, and we always start with that, because it does tend to come back to bite us later down the line, especially when we stood in front of investors sharing our ideas and our propositions, and only to find that there's no clarity around who owns the IP, and that usually fails. So and again, many technologies fail because of some of those challenges, not because the technology is weak per se, but because there's some really sort of key commercial foundations that aren't strong enough. And our role with DigiSpin was to help founders build those foundations really early on, so that when they do face investors, when they face customers, when they face partners, they're credible and they're prepared and investable. So here, I think this slide sort of reflects something that we've observed across, I suppose many incubation systems, including our own. Before we sort of redesigned our approach, we know that there's always very great intention to support. We know that we will work very hard to support founders, but sometimes we prioritize the support over structure, as I mentioned earlier on. And I think that can unintentionally kind of weaken the longer term outcomes that they want. So for example, we often see that mentoring without enough execution is giving lots of advice but not enough structured delivery, and that over reliance, I think, sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. We also see that workshops and training sort of replaces, at times, the real market test, where founders spend more time learning about how to do something than actually practicing or validating that with customers. So that theory versus sort of the application bit. And we sometimes focus on inspiring and motivating, and but actually what founders really need, they do also need that, because as a working in tech transfer, I've realized that sometimes I'm a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, and a tech transfer office at times. So you do need, because it can be quite a challenging process to go through. But it's not just that they need. They really need the commercial discipline and that rigorous kind of business practice that's often lacking. And the result is that many ventures become very well supported, well-intentioned, but not commercially robust enough to survive kind of the real market test. And I think one of the key shifts with DigiSpin was that we recognized this, and moving from supporting founders emotionally to actually structuring ventures commercially. So I just wanted this kind of point of reflection here. And then I think after challenging some of the common gaps, we see in incubation, I just wanted to also just very quickly focus on what's practically transferable from DigiSpin West Midlands, from the program. So this is not about sort of copying our model. It's more about, there is an element of borrowing with pride, the system level ideas that can sort of strengthen your own incubators in sort of your own context. And I think for us, there's three elements that made sort of the big difference for us. I think first was the venture readiness scoring that I mentioned early on in that journey. That was really key. So moving from intuition to evidence that, you know, when deciding which ventures to back, which ventures to pause, and which ventures to stop was key. You know, absolutely, that systemic evaluation on measuring that commercial maturity, investability is really, really important. I think second element for us was the investor style review panels. So almost exposing founders early to the kind of scrutiny that they'll face from real investors and commercial partners. And in a few of our sessions, we very much did that. And we gave them the space to be able to practice in a safe environment, but have different type of review panels that was very much helpful for them later down the line. And then third element, I'd say very clear IP and equity and governance framework, so that you know, founders and institutions and investors can sort of understand the ownership, the roles, and the expectations from the very beginning. And I think these tools sort of helped us shift from simply supporting founders to actually actively helping them shape a really strong, more investable proposition and company. So I think there's more, the core message for me here is very simple, is, you know, small structural upgrades that can help sort of increase the startup spin out survival, the credibility, and the commercial success. And thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Albi. Thanks for the insightful presentation. No questions in the chat so far. So perhaps what we could do is we could also just move on to the group discussion so that people can address their questions to all three of you. Mm-hmm. So I believe that my colleague David has now enabled everyone to actually unmute themselves. Yes, great. David just confirmed. Thank you, David. Okay, so if anyone has a question, just feel free to unmute yourselves, also to go on camera and to ask our speakers your questions. Or you can type them in the chat as you prefer.
There must be one question, surely.
Okay, I think there is a question that's going to come up in the chat to Albi. Let's wait a second. Meanwhile, Albi, what were the other universities involved also in the project, in the program? Because you mentioned there were three.
Yes, so we had Coventry. So Coventry University was leading the program, and we worked with Birmingham City University and University of Wolverhampton. So all we almost built like a regional program because we all geographically, you know, positioned in the and very close to each other.
Makes sense. Okay. There are a couple of questions in the chat. So to Albi, I believe to you, the question is whether startups collaborate with government agencies, and I believe the question is probably how, and what are the obstacles or the success rate?
Yes, so startups absolutely collaborate with government agencies in several different ways. So sometimes governments can be early customers for them. They can be pilot partners. They can be the funders. And with two of the projects that we took forward, and for many startups, especially in like areas like health or safety or education or digital services and so on, that support and that work with government agencies can give them real credibility. It supports them. They usually go through the valley of death, which is essentially the bridge between sort of you build your proposition, you have your proof of concept, you've done some early validation, but then you lack funding to go to that next phase. And quite often the work that we do with government agencies is quite critical actually to their success, because also from an investor's point of view, sometimes they see that as well, if the government is backing this, if there's been some funding, there's always I mean, that's a great question, by the way, because government collaboration can definitely be quite powerful, but it's not always easy. So some of the, I think, what was it, obstacle, did you say? Yeah. What the main, yeah, so the main obstacles was with government agencies. I think I'd probably say slow procurement processes and maybe some really, really strict regulations, and also very long decision timelines. So things can take forever. And I think for startups that can feel like a very long time. Often when and spin outs, and when they don't have the cash flow and they have to wait for months and months to for contracts to move forward. So there can also be that structural gap essentially when working with governments to but it's critical in that in eliminating as much of the risk before something can go to market by working with government agencies and getting further funding or support. Yeah, I don't know if that's answered that question.
I think so, but Aliu, if you still have any doubts, feel free to speak up. Okay, Aliu, good response. All right. Thank you, Avi.
Is there another question?
Yeah, so there is another question from Daniel Abshir from Ethiopia. He'd like to know what are the practical challenges of startup venture creation from the investor's perspective.
Another great question. Investors often see the challenges that founders don't anticipate, and we did quite a lot of work with the groups and the teams that went through Digispin on that point. I think from an investor's perspective, I'd probably say the biggest challenges are, well, there's a few. I think first there's definitely the execution risk. So many teams, like I said earlier, have really, really strong ideas, but not enough capability or discipline to actually deliver them at speed. And part of that, which we've had to untrain, is that academics usually want to continue to be academics, and we almost have to drag them out of that world and bring them into this world, this entrepreneurial world, where they have to think about delivering things at speed. Things like research maybe can take a long time, but actually building a revenue model and putting that in front of investors, that is something that needs to be done at speed. So teaching that discipline, I think that execution risk was number one. And then number two, I'd probably say weak commercial fundamentals. So unclear revenue models, maybe some academics have really unrealistic growth assumptions. They think that they'll grow very rapidly, but actually in reality that could look quite different, and that investors are very commercially astute, so they'll pick up on that very quickly. Also, on that weak commercial fundamentals, one of the key things is having limited proof that customers will consistently pay. That's such an important thing. You develop a new idea, you bring it to the market, but who's going to pay for it? And will they continue to pay? Is it just a one-off? Is it, who are your customers? And who else is providing a similar service? So, really digging into those really key commercial fundamentals. And then thirdly, I'd probably say, team and governance risk, maybe. So I think sometimes investors sort of worry about founder conflict, especially when there's more than one founder from the same university or other universities, and having that conflict and making sure that that doesn't exist. But unclear decision making, maybe also poor equity structures. So, if a spin-out comes out of a university and it has got a very complicated equity structure, cap table, that is usually a challenge. They'll often be turned off by that. So as clean as possible, cap table is helpful with investors, but also teams that can't scale beyond the original founders. And in some spin-outs that exist in the UK, you do find that doesn't happen. There is also, I think, another one that probably traction and evidence. So investors want proof of the real demand. They just don't want enthusiastic pilots or early interest. I think for them is making sure that's clean. And I also do want to say the bit that I really talked about a lot earlier is the messy IP ownerships. It's really, really important. So in practice, I think a lot of the spin-outs and startups fail, don't fail because the idea is weak or the research is not good enough, but it's because the structure around the idea isn't strong enough to support their growth, and investors will pick up on that.
Thank you so much, Albi. We have a couple more questions coming in, and also Siko, who raised his hand now. Maybe we can start with the question of Juliette Adon. Can you see that on your screen? And perhaps Hussein, Paul, feel free to jump in as well, because I think it's a more generic question. So it's from Juliette Adon, who says that her country, Uganda, has a very high number of startups, but most of them do not live to see their first birthdays. So she says her university is benchmarking from different institutions on business incubation hubs, how best you can advise to help solve this problem. I'm assuming regarding the high number of startups, however, who fail to overcome this gap of 1 year, and how best we can forge collaborations with funders and partners to help such startups.
Really, really good question. I'll have a stab at it, and then the others can fill in as well. Thank you for the question, Juliette. It's good to hear. First of all, Uganda is definitely one of the very aspiring and entrepreneurial countries on the continent. It's a fact of life, I guess, but it's a challenge. So everyone has ideas. They are very, very forthcoming with ideas, and then how can we actually create that best environment for those ideas to be developed into viable ventures. It's about how can we help them from a university perspective to give them the best possible chance to succeed. So it's about support mechanisms. It's about instilling a bootstrap mentality on the founders, because ultimately we have a stake in their startup journey, but it's all about them. It's all about the founder. It's all about the entrepreneur. And there is nothing. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So it's about how can we instill the will to wanting to succeed, and how can they take that as far as they can with some of the support mechanisms that we can put in place. We all know the statistics, right? So 90% of startups will fail at one point or another. 60% or so will fail after 3 years. So the longevity of actually, trying to stick at it and trying to bootstrap your way to actually just trying to validate, and then also not not to be in a tunnel vision sort of way of trying to force and maybe try and actually using data to find ways to find alternatives especially at your validation stages, and find ways to pivot, because the idea might be really, really good, but your own assumptions and preconceptions might be the failing parts. Funders definitely and partners definitely have a part to play, but we all live in different contexts, right? So UK is very primed, with venture capital available, private investment available, and lots and lots of governmental agencies that are there to help and support startup generation, business growth, etc. In your own locality, how can we change the mentality of those from a policy perspective, from local government, central government, and other funders that all have a part to play, I guess. But yeah, it's from our perspective, it's down to us to try and help the entrepreneur as much as possible, and then allowing them to see the potential of their own ideas, and allowing them to think big, because sometimes it is the person that ultimately is holding the idea back, maybe perhaps if the idea is a brilliant idea. Don't know if any of the others want to add anything to that.
I think that's pretty comprehensive, Hussein. Nothing from me.
Yeah, me too. I think that I've already mentioned some of the things that I've already mentioned. Really, some of the stuff around making sure that for them to be able to survive is they don't start just we don't just focus on motivation, but also on those commercial those principles, and making sure that the founders are testing pricing, secure paying customers, build a really good cash flow. Not just pitch decks and business plans. I mean, which are important, but I think it's just making sure that there's some clarity and there's some really good commercial principles behind the stuff that they do.
And thinking about it, I'll be based on our experience. Sorry, go on. You finish.
I was just going to say, we would be open to working with Uganda or any of the countries in this forum to sort of adapt the DigiSpin tools, or adapt it to the sister ecosystem over there rather than a copy of the UK model. But be happy to have offline conversations or commercial conversations around how that model could support over there to sort of show, support creation of sort of real demand and real revenue and through the system. Sorry, Paul, what you were going to say?
No, I was just reflecting on some of our recent experience, and apologies if you guys have mentioned this during your presentations, but one of the key things for survival for me is recognizing when is the right time. If you look at the, particularly from a spin-out perspective and startup perspective, is the time right for that business to be established? And do we have the right governance in place and support in place to ensure the survival? And I mean, they're two simple points, but they're key for me.
Is that just, and also, sorry if I may add, I think the best cultures or the best technologies and the best spin outs are the ones where or at least the best culture that we can create, we have created with DigiSpin and that you can create in that space, is actually making sure the founders are being supported. They feel supported, but they're not being spoon-fed, because I think where they're encouraged to try things, but also challenged to face the reality quite early on, like customers, like money, like mistakes, like all of it. And I think being able to have really honest conversations without kind of an ego or hype or whatever, I think makes a massive difference. And having really clear expectations around kind of ownership and roles very early on, it avoids a lot of unnecessary conflict. And and our academics and founders really appreciate the honesty and the bringing them along on the journey with you, and allowing and giving them the space where they feel safe to practice and experiment, but also they are held accountable to make sure that they deliver.
Yeah, and I think just to continue the conversation, Paul has asked, what would be the core ingredients in creating the best possible environment to nurture. Yeah, for any context, I think it's the environment and the community element, I guess, because ultimately, we're here at the university. Albi is working with kind of mature academic spin out, whereas we're working with very young, some at teenage level, but in that very early 20s, young students that are looking to explore their entrepreneurial potential. And if we can try and get them around a community of founders, around peers with similar goals and motivations, and kind of try and take a hands-off approach, as Albi's alluded to, because ultimately this is their journey, this is their idea. We're there to help support, guide, and instill those skills that they need to actually try and have the best possible chance to succeed. So it's all about what kind of a environment can you create, and then if you can attach some form of celebrating successes to inspire the next generation, and allow others to come and join their journeys, and contribute. It doesn't really take one individual or one incubator or one university for success to grow at the local and community and a regional level. It takes a huge amount of stakeholders to all play a little part to try and create that startup community widely. Yeah, so it's all about how can we bring people together that are entrepreneurial, so they can help and lift each other up, I guess.
Thank you so much for the complex responses. I think Siko has been raising his hand for quite a while now. So perhaps Siko, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, thanks, Christina, and really great presentations, Paul, and Albi. Thank you so much. Really, well, some of the points that you've raised there resonate with most of us who are in the ecosystem, entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem, particularly in the higher education sector. So really critical and pertinent points. Thank you for that. And maybe just to second what Hussein was saying around, I think was it Juliet, Christina, who asked the question. I think 12 months of startups, the 12-month startup life cycle, and I think that speaks to the context, particularly on this continent. You can only imagine a startup in a really tough environment, having to face multiple contexts and challenges, particularly if it's a digital business, for instance. And then 12 months later or 11 months later, you have a internet shutdown, for instance, a deliberate one. I mean, what do you then expect in terms of just the longevity of such businesses that are starting up, if the environment itself externally does not support entrepreneurs? But just a question to Albi, and I know this is quite a full question, but so I'm happy with however you respond to it. I was just thinking, I mean, this question obviously sits at the you're talking about around IP. So at the intersection of IP ownership, of university third stream, and then of course just the entrepreneurial innovation which Hussein was speaking about. Do you think that perhaps maybe for those for those startups or spin-outs that are quite ambitious and looking at venturing into other markets, for instance, do you think it would be useful for the ecosystem to have some sort of a platform that assists such spin-outs or even entrepreneurs, for instance, where there's an IP policy tracker, pretty much, that assists the ecosystem, where you are actually able, apart from all the support that the platform can assist in support in providing all the how-tos and toolbox for IP in that region, but perhaps something that actually then assists spin-outs to assess the market that they're going into before they actually venture into it, around the IP aspect. Because the IP ownership is, as you said, it gets quite messy. It gets quite there's a lot of friction that then happens there. But perhaps, do you think that would be a benefit to the ecosystem, where we can already assess what kind of challenges exist if I want to test or venture into this particular market, but also what kind of support or frameworks exist in that environment, in that market, before I venture into it. Because IP policy is different from region to region, from country to country, and the contexts are specific to they're all nuanced. So do you think that that could be something that we could look at exploring or experimenting with, just to assist as an additional resource? Because there isn't any centralized database or information point where all of this useful information that you presented could be found. But perhaps if we are to create some centralized system or platform that then assists universities, spin-outs, etc., to navigate and actually venture before they test those particular markets. Thanks, Ab.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, that's, yeah, it's a really, it is a really important point if I've understood this right. And I think I definitely agree with the principle of it. I think on the practical level, yes, a shared platform would help, only if it's more than just a website or a kind of a typical directory.
Absolutely, yeah.
I guess what spin-outs sort of struggle with when they go cross-border, especially, it's not it's the navigation system, because there's different rules, different IP regimes, different partners, different funders, different systems. There's lots of different ways of doing business. So for early teams, I think that can be quite overwhelming. But I think a platform would be helpful, because it could act like a bridge, more than just kind of a typical like billboard thing. So yeah, from a DigiSpin perspective, I think that's how we think about systems, and not just as technology platforms first, but as almost like connected pipelines. So pipelines between universities, incubators, investors, markets. I don't think the future is one big central platform, but more of almost like a linked ecosystem where you can share standards and pathways, and there's lots of those that address some of the bits online, available. But yeah, I think more of a linked ecosystem rather than one big central platform potentially. But yeah,
absolutely, yeah. More of an what can I call it? An exchange, right?
Like a knowledge exchange platform. Yeah, I think that would genuinely help on a kind of practical level. But
absolutely, yeah.
And I was just reflecting on that as well, Sika. You look at some of the national guidance that Albie would have spoken about. There's always a requirement for local interpretation. So your platform is a key tool, but it's not there to answer everything. So I like the idea of an exchange rather than a dedicated platform.
Yeah, probably jurisdiction and things like legalities and laws and borders will also come into this one, because IP difference from where you are context wise, jurisdiction wise. In the UK, obviously, we've got the Intellectual Property Office that is very central. Allows the UK to look at its legalities and jurisdiction levels around intellectual property. But then again, from an African context, how do you start thinking about IP perspective, locally to start off with before you start even thinking about other jurisdictions?
Very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, we're running 15 minutes past the finish time. So I'm afraid we'll have only room for one more question that's already been in the chat.
Ask you,
and
I have some question. I am
Okay.
Mr. Mohammed Abdi
Go
Suleiman,
ahead.
and I live in a country in Somaliland, a city in Hargeisa. I have a tendency for the 3 sessions and last day in this session. And I have at Haqabtir solar energy, and I'm searching for the fund to scale up in my business, because the business is needing fund to build and start up in daily activity. The country in Somaliland is a little funded in the minister of the USA in Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a little USD, and the US encouragement is needing and funds to scale up in business. And then I need funds to investment in Haqabtir solar energy, and will communicate my the cell phone in the right and chats. I ask you one question.
Yes, Mohammed, I believe I can answer that. I think you were with us yesterday as well. So I'll send you an email, and I'll contact you with Har Hub, who
Yeah.
are based in Hargeisa.
Yeah.
They are an incubator that BIC Africa and specifically the Somali project that is led by UNIDO is working with. So the business incubator should perhaps be able to support you. So I'll put you in touch via email. And then, yeah, once that contact is established, hopefully you can have probably a chat with them about how they can support you.
And I have in Haqabtir solar energy many customers, and like in rural area, IDP comes in low income family, because do not access in high electricity rate, because it's a very poor in income and rural area. And example, some children will not access in the light, because in the morning will be taken in livestock, because the evening will need the solar kits. Then I will establish in Haqabtir solar energy in Somaliland country, because I have a tendency some investments and to encourage in the youth encouragement. And I have some videos, and the panelists I have and the Haqabtir solar energy in the that reduce high electricity rate in our country and help the low income family and IDP comes, because it's a very big problem, because some people in country Somaliland and more of them in the rural area, because I established 2023 in my Haqabtir solar energy, because I am searching for the investments I don't have at this time, because I attended some 6 competitions in our country.
Thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, we understand the situation, and that's why effectively we're working with the business incubators there, so that they could support entrepreneurs like yourself and support the community and make an impact really in the local communities. So I'll send you an email, okay, and I'll put you in touch with Har Hub. Yeah, I believe Hussein who has
Yeah, I'm familiar with Heart Hub. I've been
Yeah.
there. Mohammed, we're from the same place. Well done for joining. And yeah, please do visit them. They're an incredible organization, as Katrina has mentioned. Well done. Very good.
Yeah, and sorry, Paul, Hussein, and I'll be really running over time now. If you could just answer perhaps Daniel's question, and then we have to close. So Daniel was just asking about your recommendation for evaluating startup values, because in Ethiopia, there's a problem in valuing startups. Namely, he suggests that startups themselves come up with exaggerated value assessment, and then often investors are not willing to invest.
Yeah, I mean it's a real issue. Not just over there, it's a real issue over here. You know, early stage startups, they are very hard to value because there's often no real revenue or, you know, track record. So usually you'd have some kind of information to be able to base that valuation off. But if there's nothing, I think my personal view, you know, and this is just my personal view, is that whatever valuation happens must be based on real evidence, not ambition. And there's a lot of ambition usually. And I think the more, you know, more traction, more customers, more product in use, more, you know, the stronger the team, the easier it is to, you know, stronger the IP, the easier it is to justify kind of a higher value. And usually when you get, you know, when founders do tend to push for exaggerated kind of valuations really early on, it can be a turn off for investors. So it can slow the company down. So I think it's a challenging one, but I would say, you know, valuation should definitely be based on some level of evidence. So it's bringing all of those really key ingredients together. You know, the IP, the product, the use, the customers, the money that it's made so far, the licensing, and all of that element to be able to value things a little bit better. But I mean, there's lots of different ways of valuing kind of companies and IP and so on, but it's never 100% accurate. But I definitely stay away from the exaggerated valuations because they can scare investors off. I don't know if that's answered.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yep.
Daniel just sent a thumb up.
He's happy.
So yeah, I believe it's time to close. So first of all, thank you so much to the team of Coventry. Thank you, Paul, Hussein, Albi, for being here and for giving really quite a complex overview. Paul with a broader picture, Hussein with really deep diving into how you support students and enterprises, and Albi for the specific case of DigiSpin and for showing us the complex process that it involves. Thank you so much. Thanks also for staying over time and for the engaging discussion. Thank you to all the participants for being here. Don't forget there is one more session tomorrow with Warwick University. We'll be happy to see you again. And yes, please feel free to reach out to the Coventry team and to ourselves if you have any questions. We hope that the session was useful for you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you,
you.
everyone.